destroying my setup here by turning things. Okay, no distractions. This is, I want to be closer, but this camera on YouTube has me so tiny. Okay. It's what it is. All right. Welcome to Real Humans, Great Souls, the podcast about all things human philosophy and well-being and food and health. And today's big topic, everybody thinks about it at least once or twice in a lifetime, longevity. Why longevity? How longevity? What is longevity? What is normal lifespan? What is a normal existence, etc.? So, I guess this book is lying here for a purpose. I haven't even thought about how that relates to the topic, but it does, of course. So I wanted to record this, even though I'm also going to do a summit interviewing lots of different people about their take on longevity and why they think, of course, their approach is appropriate. But I want to talk about the human desire and why do we work so hard and why do we have so many misconceptions on what works so well or not so well for our human lifespan and for keeping ourselves well. So, of course, the title here is Happy Longevity. So some of you may know that I have run 2 summits titled Happy Body, Happy Planet. To me, the purpose, the joyfulness of longevity is that we should live, of course, with joy and with happiness. So if the longevity is just for the sake of, what's the word? Vegetating along. Now that's too strong a word, but you know what I mean. Then what's the point of extending a state of just vegetating? So when we are children, we of course think that life is forever. Life is life. It shouldn't end, right? Our parents will be there forever, our siblings, our grandparents, everybody will be there because that's our expectation. Because the concept of a life cycle and an ending is also just not conversed about or talked about or even mentioned, right? Don't talk about it in front of the children. They're too small to understand, etc. So we have these concepts. But I actually wanted to start somewhere very different. About a decade ago, when things were starting to get all uploaded on the interwebs and were not yet censored and modified and, narrated toward an agenda or selected toward an agenda, there were articles. I think I was looking up long living or the longest living populations or long living peoples. And I came across an article from 1984 that described a family arriving from northern Pakistan in London with various generations, it was not discussed what the reasons for their travel were. And among the family, a larger group was an elderly gentleman whose passport read that he was born in 1838. And this is the year 1984 that he arrives in London. Can you do the math? I always like to challenge my audiences to do that math. How old was this gentleman? And why did it create such a stir? How could he possibly have a passport that had him born in 1838, arriving fully functioning, having just traveled on an airplane in 1984? Now, when you do the math, you come out that he was either 145 or 46 years old. Now, people were, of course, immediately deciding that this passport, this was a misprint, it's the wrong birth date, and he couldn't enter the country on this passport with this wrong birth date. And communications were started between the Pakistani government, and the verification of this man's passport was demanded. And supposedly, at the time, there was, of course, no cell phone and interwebs available for fast communication. After a couple of days, it was confirmed that the birth date was correct and that this gentleman was indeed 146 years old. Whereupon several journalists, in particular the journalist who then wrote this story, traveled to the north of Pakistan and ventured, there were no roads yet into the area, ventured into Hunza land, an area inside the mountains that was shielded from the remainder of Pakistan and the other surrounding countries, with a population of an estimated at the time 70 to 100,000, that's it, with a very intricate, beautiful culture. And you can look up, the Hunza weaving of cloth that they were wearing, and these beautiful hats that they have, and jewelry, and beautiful clothing, living up there in a very precise lifestyle, using donkeys for transportation, walking. It was estimated at least 10 miles a day, everybody, from place to place. And they had mills pushed by donkeys, and orchards and fields of foods that were grown. And it turned out these people, there had been somebody earlier in the early 1900s, I think in the 19 teens, written about the Hunza, and had already established that this was a doctor who was sent to help to deal with diseases, who, however, had concluded that there were hardly any diseases in these people. So again, in 1984, it was confirmed that these people did not have cancers, did not have hardly any other diseases. So why was that? And why was their average life expectancy, including childhood deaths and everything, literally life expectancy, like we calculated, 120 years? So it was nothing unusual that there were 150-year-olds, because, it averages out with earlier deaths. And the inquisition into why they lived so long further noted that they ate almost entirely raw plant food. Now, I don't want to take my argument away in advance here, but of course, when I read that, I laughed out loud and was like, well, duh. And they did something else. They had a fasting period every spring when food was sparse for up to 3 months, where they ate hardly anything but drank like a smoothie, I suppose, a drink out of apricots. And they also ate the apricot kernels, which are like almonds. And then now people think that's what does the longevity. But of course, I think it is multiple elements, particularly the diet and the fasting and drinking these apricot smoothies, or smashing the dried apricots into a water mix, milling that. I don't know the exact process they used, but it was a drink made out of apricot kernels and apricot seeds, which was what they lived on, because the dried apricots lasted through the winter months, right? And could then be consumed like that. And so they stayed very strong and muscular, but more skinny than anything else, and lived with this plant-based diet, occasionally using something like goat cottage cheese, one could call it. So occasionally when there was plenty of goat milk, but that would be like 10 times a year, maybe a little portion of goat cheese or less. So when you think about that, because mainly they grew plants. Their goat herds were not significant herds. Those were just smaller groups of animals. And like I already said, their transportation modes led them up and down these steep paths in the mountains into the inner valleys between the mountains. And therefore, they also got a lot of exercise. And they weaved and they prepared their foods in beautiful ways and laid them out. And another thing that was observed that was very significant among the Hunza was that they celebrated all the time. Everything was a celebration. Yes, they got their jobs done, their work done, so to speak, but they celebrated life all the time, and everybody would participate, the babies to the grandparents to the great-great-great-grandparents. And there were other elements. Women conceived and gave birth into their 60s. Obviously, men stayed virile into their hundreds. And the maturity age for couples to kind of get married or get together, I'm not sure what their ceremony was for, but there was a ceremony for couples getting married, in quotation marks, getting together, was in their 30s. They were considered too young, too juvenile to have children and get together before they were in their mid-30s. So you have this entire lifespan spanned out over a much longer period of time with full integration of all ages. So I think I'm just going to leave that picture painted there. It made so much sense to me. You have no idea. And of course, today, when they talk about the Hunza, a lot of that has been eliminated from the text, again, because the narrative does not fit the narrative of modern medicine, or that modern medicine would like to portray. So yeah, when we celebrate life, we have a different sense of time, that every moment is bursting with energy and celebration and achievement, but not achievement as in competitiveness, but achievement as a group, as a family, as a village, right? In the older parts, they were not governed by a religion. And why that is significant, I go into that in a little bit. So yeah, my own life experience is that I realized young that we're all born with different bodily abilities, right? Our bodies have flaws. I have a heart murmur. I have a hole in my heart. I have all kinds of weak tissue. So we all have to work extra hard. That's why I always wear lipstick, because I don't like having purple lips. You know, they look sort of grayish, purplish when I'm stressed or not well. What do you mean, Johanna, not well? You're always well. Of course I'm well, but I still have a sometimes struggling heart. And therefore I have to do extra work to keep that functioning, right? And keep it strong. And I need to go walking and running and working out, etc. So that is, of course, our responsibility to take care of the gift of a body that we have. And some have a more challenging biological circumstance than others. Some have a full basket of capabilities of physicality, right? And others not so much. So therefore, of course, life expectancy is also influenced by our genetic makeup, by our inheritance, and only so much can we change of that genetic makeup that we come with. I just today was saying, yes, you can heal and reverse chronic diseases because they are lifestyle caused, but you cannot grow a hand back if it happens to be chopped off or not be there when you're born, right? So that those are things that we cannot influence. All right, a little bit about biology. I'm going to go first to biology, even though I had it planned another way around. What is life on planet Earth? You know, so many people talk about how to achieve your best physique or your best longevity, or what to do, which supplements to take, and which techniques to follow, and of course, what to eat. And the spectrum is very, very broad. I'll go a little bit into the statistics in a minute. But what is a lifespan? Why is there such a thing as a life cycle of all life on planet Earth? Why does everything other than rocks, but even they, get worn down and change or solidify over thousands of years? And or we don't know, maybe they pulverize in another 1,000 years. We you know, there's only so much. So nothing on planet Earth lasts like that, right? Like everything goes in cycles. Oh, done. Now, we always talk about, you know, the growing, the learning, and then the decline. Now, I tend to say, yes, there is a moment of decline, but that moment of decline does not have to be a painful deterioration or a slow deterioration. It can just also be a wonderful life with all the experiences, increasing experience, increasing until it's time to let go. And then it's done. So the biology on planet Earth has it that everything is supposed to have its demise, and in its demise, enrich the next generations. Now, we may be the only ones who, in our demise, in the Western cultures, no longer really fertilize the next generations because we're considered old wood and no good for the next generations. So that the young'uns do not sufficiently benefit in our Western culture because of this physiology that has become so distorted in our expectations, right? We expect that there's always something we can do to tighten these wrinkles and to bunch up the lips and to whatever, bulk up the body. Some of it we can do. We can surgically alter our faces. If you ask me, it always looks terrible, no matter how people think it's so cool. And of course, we could just enjoy the fact that if we conceived of wrinkles as marks of wisdom and wonder and beauty, everything would change, right? Everything of our own self-respect and of the respect of others would change. So, what is a normal life expectancy for humans? Now, I've just told you about the Hunza, and there used to be an argument, although I just looked it up among the mammals. It is not really easily decipherable what that life expectancy is for all the mammals. We used to say 10 times the sexual maturity age is a normal life expectancy of mammals. But I just looked up all the bigger apes are sexually mature at 6 to 8 years, but they only live 40 years, maybe up to 50. So that doesn't quite mean 10 times, right? Then I have not looked up the sexual maturity of whales that live 200 years, especially some whales more than others. And of course, non-mammals are completely all over the place. I personally have actually seen and talked to a huge turtle, tortoise, I think they're called. It was like gigantic, like 6 foot long and big, like my desk. Maybe it's not quite 6 foot. Maybe it's, 4.5, 5. And this old turtle, and this was in Africa, it was either in Zimbabwe or in Malawi, but I think it was in Zimbabwe. This tortoise, or huge turtle, was supposed to have been 600 years old. Now, even if it only was 500 years old, I was sitting there admiring this huge animal and looking at it, how all animals look at you and check you out. And I was trying to imagine what life was like when this turtle was born, right, and came into the world. and now being shown off in a park, sort of protected as this ancient creature. So there are creatures that have long lifespans, and still they are species, the lifespans are always species specific. Species specific. Little tongue twister there. The same is true for trees and plant life. Every plant has a lifespan. So therefore, it stands to reason that the lifespan for humans is indeed, on average, should be 120. Maturity age being sexual maturity age. Now we're completely distorted with all the junk food and girls getting their period at age 7, 8, 9. It used to be more like 13, 14, so that would times 10 would make it 130, 140. But if that's a little exaggerated, so let's take it a little back. The Hunza are right in the middle of that expectation. All right, now, oh my God, I've talked for half an hour. I thought this was going to be a short one because I just want to go into the logic of how to have a happy, long life as opposed to coming with another fad diet. So, talking about fad diets, I just was listening to a gentleman who had taken out lots of books or relatively famous books, only the more famous ones, of people who were promoting a particular diet for longevity. And he went through, he actually did 3 videos because there was always, people were always asking for more. And all of them, just to cut to the chase, there was one called the caveman diet. You know, the caveman was going to make you strong and live long. And of course, the caveman stories are complete fantasy anyway. You know, there's no evidence of cavemen ever. When you see the ancient cave paintings, there's nothing that looks like what people in the West consider cavemen history. And some of them are very, very old, meaning the cave paintings, like 27,000 and more. So all the different fad diets, there are lots of carnivore, you know, your glass of milk and your 5 eggs a day and you will live forever. They all then, you know, how this gentleman did it was, you know, this is the book, this is what they're promoting for longevity, and they died at age such and such from such and such, right? So for example, carnivore diet, Muscle Man, showing maybe they were successful as bodybuilder or as strongman at a young age, and then died of a heart attack at 25, or you know, so and he goes up and up in age. And the carnivore diets, kind of, there's some people who manage to get older on carnivore diets if they include some salads, some vegetables. But they all kind of die of either cancer or heart attack or kidney failure or what was the other one? Liver. Yeah, of course. No, it becomes very clear with all these fad diets. And of course, it's still going on with the keto diet and paleo diet it always turns out that the promoters of the particular diet live longer on average. Again, there are exceptions. When they are more plant-based. Now, what all of them, and then of course, there are also the plant-based promoters, some of them die younger in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and do not make it to the big three-figure numbers, right? And what struck me was that nobody mentions the fact that out of 11 million species, or however many we have identified, all of those species eat their food or consume their nourishment in the raw, fresh from the ground or the flesh. Some may dig the flesh away to let it rot a little bit, but it remains raw, and it will acquire some more life forms like worms and beetles and things creeping into the flesh that animals may dig into the ground until they want to eat it. But it does certainly not get cooked. So how did we come up with this idea that if all species on the planet eat fresh, unheated food, that we must make our food double dead, so to speak, right? First we cut it or we kill it, and then we double dead it. We make it double dead by killing it again in the pot, on the grill, in the oven, or however we cook it, right? We cook it to make it double dead. So I find it revealing such an incredible lack of the ability of humans to observe what is happening around them in the biology of this planet. It's right there. I mean, you just need to look out the window, or you just need to look what I'm doing here. These are the tops of beets that I ate, that I just put into a little bit of water, and what do? They grow again, right? However, that life too will expire unless I eat it before it expires. So when these leaves become limp, now they're really strong, and look how vibrant they are, right? And the little carrot here, the carrot top, it's adorable. And I just do it because I love watching these beet tops grow. When you think, you've already eaten the beet, but no, there's still more life in there, and there's another life cycle happening. So, however, that plant cannot sit there for 50 years. In fact, it can only sit there for a couple of weeks, and then its expiration date shows itself by the leaves becoming limp. And of course, I will eat it before it dies, because that's why it's there, because I want to eat some more of that life that is left in the top of the beet. And I want to eat it alive, not kill it before I eat it. When you think about it, why are we so, I don't know, is it brainwashed or something? What is it that we don't see the reality of life on planet Earth? So why am I talking about the raw factor of our nourishment to stay sharp throughout this lifespan that is indeed limited? The lifespan is limited. Now, we can, of course, spend the first 20 years just learning. And then the next 20 years, working, 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 working. And then the next 20 years deteriorating until we're so dysfunctional that we just sit in a hospice, not hospice, that's the wrong word, in a nursery home and are brain dead. How many people lose their faculties because this body requires nourishment and maintenance, and of course, not just through food, but other things as well, such as oxygen, good water, good movement, good energies, and good celebrations. When we take all that away from the over 60s, I am 70 now, and my life has only just begun. That's how I feel. Yes, I have to do something about my teeth, for example, and that's on the agenda this year. But yeah, that goes back to my young years when I didn't know and didn't observe, because, of course, nobody asks us to observe how life works on planet Earth. And if we do observe how the plant works or how an animal cycle works, we sort of think we are exempt from that. How? How did we get here? Okay, I'll go into a few of my thoughts on that before we wrap this up. I think what happened is that when empires, and I go back to this all the time in almost every podcast, I come to this analysis of history, right? That when we have empires and we are oppressed in as a populace and shoved into categories in which we cannot excel, or where we cannot, in the olden days, where we cannot celebrate. Why I'm saying that is also when I came to live in Zimbabwe in Africa and just got some of the celebrations in the village, even in the towns, because people maintain their vitality by celebrating together and by enhancing each other and by celebrating each other. Not, okay, you got to celebrate me because I achieved this, but by rejoicing in the fact that we're here, that we recognize each other, that we love each other. And of course, the word love was a curse word almost, like for many decades, and has only recently been revived, maybe in a new way, that we consciously actually can express our love for our friends and our families and our loved ones, our romantic loves. So then, what is a better approach to a happy longevity? How do we get there? We already know that. It's just the raw factor has not been entered into the equation. And it changes everything because it revitalizes everything. You cannot have this vitality on a dead animal flesh diet. It's just not possible. Is that pompous of me to say it? Yeah, sure. It may very well be. But we already know we need good sleep, good air, good exercise. We need trauma work. We need to get our mindset into a place where we love our life. And that means we need to work through, and you know what I say, turn your traumas into tools. You know, you can work with me and we can do all that. That's in fact what the Super Happy Body class is all about. And we must have purpose. Now, many people say you have to have a spiritual life as well and a spiritual community. And yeah, for many that is true. I've always thought that I'm very spiritual, and yes, sometimes I love sitting down and meditating or going to different spiritual celebrations or events, but I don't need a church personally. I find that my human morality and my love for humanity extends to everybody. I could never exclude somebody on the basis of their affiliation or color or background or culture, etc. Now you're going to say, so you're going to love the terrorists as well? I know too much. Most terrorists are created by the ones who need to have terrorists to blame, just as a general suggestion. So purpose and meaning are the end all be all for us being here. And the purpose doesn't have to be changing the world or leading a revolution or founding a new religion. Purpose can also be that deeper and deeper understanding of our own family, of our circle of friends, of our creations, of our art, of our inventions. All of that, of course, is purpose. Now, did one podcast, Creativity is What Makes Us Humans, right? And kind of creativity almost has like purpose in it as part of its definition. Because you can't create something without that something having a purpose. And even if that purpose is just to be a piece of beauty on somebody's wall or in somebody's space, right? Or in somebody's ears because it's a piece of music. So there's always purpose in creativity. And without that, we are just not human. We are better or lesser functioning machines executing somebody else's design, right? Because it is always somebody's design. Even if you sit in a cubicle for a lifetime and do your tasks well, somebody designed the cubicle, somebody designed that job for you, somebody has a purpose for your productivity. And even if it's just for them to make a lot of money off of you, they have a purpose. And of course, you can say, well, my purpose is to survive and feed myself and my family, and therefore I'm sitting in this cubicle. Yes, that's also purpose. But if there is no creativity in that purpose, it becomes very difficult for the human mind and the human heart to remain in a place of wanting to live, or let alone being exuberantly alive, right? So back to the celebration factor. When we don't, I mean, of course, we hope that procreation is also part of celebration, the celebration factor. Unfortunately, not when my grandmother, who did have a long life, got to 94. But it was interesting. Her purpose was to tend her garden and to prove to her grandchildren that she could still provide something for us. So that was definitely her purpose. She was really happy to be able to send me a couple of $100 every month when I went to this big university, Columbia University in New York City. You know, she would all the way from Germany send me those dollars and was therefore participating in my achievements. So there's purpose. So I was just getting to the celebration part. The more we celebrate without, and the more we let go of revenge or hate or any of those notions, the more we stay on our track of celebrating the life we have. And I was going to say, Nelson Mandela describes that if I keep this hate in me, it's going to eat me up. And it's not allowing me to enjoy and lead the nation into a joyful or more accomplished or more fulfilling future. So when we rid ourselves of all those feelings, we automatically allow ourselves to celebrate more. And of course, also every celebration lets go of grievances and what do you call that? Yeah, those hateful, vengeful, judgmentalness feelings that eat us more than the others. Okay, just to summarize, and yes, it's not going to be very long. So my prescription for myself and my clients as much as possible is to have this guiding light, your purpose, your next desire. And it doesn't have to be one purpose all your life long. Oh, that's what I didn't talk about exactly. Although you have the varying personalities, I found this attorney, one of the first African American attorneys, John Morton Finney, who got himself 11 degrees just because he had so much of a purpose of proving to the world and to America that his brown skin did not define his intelligence or his vitality or his ability, right? He got himself 11 degrees, was active as an attorney until he was 106 years old. So he was still practicing at 106. And that is a wonderful example of proving something to the world, kind of demonstrating in your own existence that you can put out all that you have in you in the service of humanity to demonstrate that it is possible to, and of course, in service of his community. Then there are other scenarios. I was listening to my colleague in so many ways. I interviewed her as well, Mimi Kirk, who describes how she has these varying careers in her life. And she works as a stand-in in Hollywood. Then she creates a game for women, cowboy women, power women. And then she then she becomes a vegan chef. Then she learns about raw food and she writes all these raw food books. And then at age 82, she decides that she wants to paint. And she paints these huge paintings. She's 85 now and exhibits and sells in galleries. So she reinvents herself again and again and again. And that's in a way true for myself too. But always in this strong purpose of putting your creativity into the world, right? Wherever you are, you're doing what you're doing at this point in time with your, passion is overused, the word, because it's not just passion. It's also the authenticity in bringing yourself out into the world. I don't know. Maybe, it depends on how you feel. Passion when I grew up was a little bit flat because it was just sort of sexual exuberance, passion. But of course, what I'm talking about is the entirety of us, ourselves as beings being put out into your current most dominant activity. Another person I was wanting to talk about is Jane Goodall. I had a conversation with her about 8 years ago for my first summit. And she was talking about that for her to keep her body functioning. And I mean, is she now 90? Yeah, she's just about 90. And still traveling the world. She was explaining to me how she eats plant-based and a lot of raw food and a lot of fruits, she was saying, plant-based and a lot of fruits. But sometimes when she's invited into indigenous communities, she eats a little of what they eat because it feels she can participate and celebrate with them. And that again is the magic, right? That you're not so fixated that you can't adapt a little bit to join others. So that's how she does it. And I'm sure there are lots of other avenues of bringing what I'm talking about to everyone's individual authentic being. Whether it is this changing over or whether it is this staying on this track and just living it to the fullest. But it all has to be living it to the fullest. That's the point, really. So create your longevity. You can do it, and you can still create longevity even if you are at an advanced age, as we call that, right? I am certainly at an advanced age. I am 70 years old. But when I read and see these people who are in their 80s and 90s, I feel like, oh, I'm just a spring chicken. But our time is limited on this planet. So it's not a race. In fact, if you're racing, it feels like you have so much less of life than if you're intensively experiencing each moment. Obviously, to get there, I did a lot of work on what are all these components that come together in addition to the high raw diet, I will call it, and the plant-based diet, definitely. In addition to that, we have, like I said, in my Evolve system, I developed all these different elements that have to come together, and one can do them, study them, and implement them one after the other. That is the breathing, the exercising, the trauma work, the air, going out into the air, the being under trees, the all around the core of it being purpose. Now, many people call it meaning, but I feel purpose is better because it's more active, right? You pursue your purpose. You are actively involved. Meaning is a little bit more like, oh yeah, everything happens for a reason. It's a meaning, that kind of thing. It's more passive. All right, I want your life to be active. I want your life to be purposeful, and I want you to have happy longevity. And yes, we can still ride a bike at 110. That's been done too. But we should not be talking about, well, in biblical times, people lived to 800 years. That's, in my humble opinion, nonsense, because biology doesn't work like that. A species doesn't suddenly move from 800 years to only 80 years. That doesn't seem logical to me. But do we shorten our lifespan through junk food and all kinds of stupid behavior? And therefore, instead of having a life expectancy of 120, we now only have one of 80. And at some point in the industrial age, in the industrial era, it was considered 55. So we can poison ourselves into a shorter longevity or life expectancy, but we don't have to. And in today's world, of course, the more you eliminate chemicals of all kinds, also from your environment and from what you put in here, the better your chance at shining your light. All right, and that is the end of Happy Longevity. Talk to me about getting to your best lifestyle that helps you to rejoice, be on purpose, and have a happy longevity, not just a vegetative longevity. Okay, guys, this has been Real Humans, Great Souls, and I'm wearing my oops. That's too funny. It's not working. Okay, here. My hoodie. Not only because I stay young, but because I also saw this wonderful Minister of Justice or something like that of South Africa who just led the team to The Hague. I should really get her name. I've never really, I always recognize her, but I've never really looked at what her name is. And I saw her talking to a huge crowd wearing a black hoodie. I don't know where she was, probably back home in South Africa, but it should be hot there now. That's why I thought, okay, let me put on my black hoodie, because life is too beautiful to worry about so many things. Worry has never helped anybody. That's another thing, actually, I should have talked about that. Fear and worry shortens your life expectancy significantly. I don't do fear. I do awareness. All right. We really do have to wrap this up. This needs to have another one. But yeah, make your life your own. Make it awesome. Make it joyful. Create happy longevity. Talk to me. Ciao. See you next week.